What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy, coming at you with another Wednesday in the Word. So, this week we're getting into Genesis chapter 8. Summary of things so far. God made the world. People messed up. And continued to mess up. More and more and more. For like 1,000 plus years, I think. For quite a while. Long enough for God to say, okay, this is bad. I'm hitting the reset button. By means of a flood. But Noah was righteous enough for God to say, okay, you and your family get to live. So, big boat is built. God sends the flood. And that's where we are now. So, Genesis chapter 8, verse 1. But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and livestock with him in the boat. He sent a wind to blow across the earth, and the floodwaters began to recede. The underground water stopped flowing, and the torrential rains from the sky were stopped. So the floodwaters gradually receded from the earth. After 150 days, exactly 5 months from the time the flood began, the boat came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. 2.5 months later, as the waters continued to go down, other mountain peaks became visible. Okay, so the whole exactly 5 months thing has a little note attached to it. So it says on the 17th day of the 7th month is what it technically says in Hebrew, which I'm trying to remember. If you go back to chapter 7, it mentions on a certain day of the second month. I forget if it was the 17th day that it said. Yeah, on the 17th day of the second month. Okay, so yeah, that's where it gets the 5 months comment from. And 2.5 months later, because the Hebrew says on the first day of the 10th month. So yeah, the flood had gone on for a while. I mean, again, it's going back to the previous chapter. It was 40 days and 40 nights of flooding, of continued elevation due to the flooding. So, I guess then it took another 90 days for the floodwaters to go down enough that the boat came to rest on a mountain. Well, it says on the mountains, plural, of Ararat. So maybe it was kind of between some high peaks. I don't know, but in any case, 90 days after the flooding stops increasing and starts decreasing, then, boat comes to rest up somewhere high. And then, it said 2.5 months later, other mountain peaks became visible. Still doesn't say that it's back down to, normal level. So, verse 6. After another 40 days, so another 40 days from all of this stuff that was just mentioned. Okay. Just so we're clear on that. After another 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the boat and released a raven. The bird flew back and forth until the floodwaters on the earth had dried up. So, okay. So he released a raven, presumably with the idea of, like, you know, getting a sense of the flood's recession, I guess. Because, you know, there are some... I mean, I guess the idea is that there are only certain places that, you know, birds will come to rest permanently. But I guess maybe ravens are some of the more tolerant birds when it comes to that. So, then we get to verse 8. He also released a dove to see if the water had receded and it could find dry ground. But the dove could find no place to land because the water still covered the ground. So it returned to the boat, and Noah held out his hand and drew the dove back inside. So, I mean, it said there were, you know, mountain peaks that had already been uncovered. So maybe the raven came to rest on one of those. Whereas the dove decided... I don't know if doves typically only come to rest on trees or on certain things. But point is, the dove didn't stay as of yet because the waters had not receded enough for a suitable place to be found for the dove. Verse 10. After waiting another 7 days, Noah released the dove again. This time the dove returned to him in the evening with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. Then Noah knew that the floodwaters were almost gone. He waited another 7 days and released the dove again. This time it did not come back. So... I'm not sure what exactly would have made the dove come back with an olive leaf in its beak on the second try. But, I mean, now it's like, okay, well, there's proof of some sort of vegetation that has been uncovered. So, I mean, there's definitely some... I don't know. There's progress. There was progress being made regarding the floods receding, and then when the dove comes back, that's pretty much the sign that, okay, yeah, everything's good. We could probably get out of the boat now and find somewhere habitable. Because I guess the assumption is the mountains of Ararat are not. Or at least where they were stuck. Or where they landed on said mountains was not livable. So, anyway, verse 13. Noah was now 601 years old. On the first day of the new year, 10.5 months after the flood began, the floodwaters had almost dried up from the earth. Noah lifted back the covering of the boat and saw that the surface of the ground was drying. 2 more months went by, and at last the earth was dry. So, I mean, it takes some time between ground being revealed by flood and ground actually being dry. Like, if you've ever been somewhere where it has rained a lot and the ground has become soft, wet, and, like, muddy, it's a very different thing from the ground being, you know, dry enough to comfortably walk on. Especially if you assume that, sandals and the like were the typical foot gear of the time. So, verse 15 now. Then God said to Noah, "Leave the boat, all of you, you and your wife, and your sons and their wives. Release all the animals, the birds, the livestock, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, so they can be fruitful and multiply throughout the earth." So Noah, his wife, and his sons and their wives left the boat, and all the large and small animals and birds came out of the boat, pair by pair. So now it's habitable again, and God has, basically said, all right, you're good to go. Go ahead, get off the boat, and let all the animals get off the boat. Now we're going to begin Life on Earth version 2.0, basically. Verse 20 now. Actually, before I get to that, again, it's noted the whole pair by pair of animals, this time exiting the boat. Still don't know if that necessarily means that they were, organized about it, or if it was just, the pairs of each kind of animal all left together. So, anyway, now, verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and there he sacrificed as burnt offerings the animals and birds that had been approved for that purpose. So that means he didn't do it during the flood. That hadn't really been specified before that, oh yeah, the sacrifice is going to be after, although that makes sense. If you've got a boat made out of wood, doing burnt offerings on said boat, maybe not the best idea. Could easily ignite said boat and cause it to burst into flame. So, I guess, there were other animals that needed to be provided for food, though, but the sacrificial animals were not sacrificed until after everything was said and done with the flood. All right, 21. And the Lord was pleased with the aroma of the sacrifice and said to himself, "I will never again curse the ground because of the human race, even though everything they think or imagine is bent toward evil from childhood. I will never again destroy all living things. As long as the earth remains, there will be planting and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night." So, I hadn't really taken note previous times reading through the Bible of the whole of the part where God says he will never curse the ground again because of humanity. This is obviously alluding to the way that the ground was cursed. Primarily from Adam, I would assume, because, after they had sinned, God mentioned the ground being cursed, and that, his labor would be difficult, in order to grow food and cultivate the ground and things like that. That there was also the Curse of Cain, which is why I hesitated on the Adam thing. But Cain's curse, it was more that he was cursed, not that the ground was cursed because of him. So I think this is more so alluding to, the curse that was mentioned to Adam, because God specifically said in that instance that the ground was cursed because of him. So, does that imply then that at this point the ground was uncursed? Because he specifically mentions now that there will be, times of planting and harvest. Were there not before? I don't know. But the whole never again destroying all living things is the part that we all know about, or at least a lot of us do, and never flooding the whole earth again. So, God officially confirms at this point that, all right, almost as if because of Noah's sacrifice, that's what seems like is going on here. Because it said Noah made the sacrifice, the aroma was pleasing to the Lord, and then he said these things. So, because of Noah being righteous, making this sacrifice, which was pleasing, God's like, okay, you know what? There is some good, even while things are completely bad, because, I mean, that's what it was like prior to the flood. God viewed, like, all of creation as corrupt and broken and evil, except for Noah. So, but because of this, or at least at this moment, God is now saying, okay, look, there is some good that can be found even amidst the most evil times. Even though people are naturally bent towards evil from the time of their birth, there are still people that end up being good. So, for that reason, I will never again wipe out all living things. And, you know, there will be times of plenty and times of little, but it's going to be, you know, balanced, or at least, you know, more balanced than, okay, wipe everything out. So, yeah, I guess that's pretty much all there is going on here. I mean, that's the end of the chapter. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I understand the mention of planting and harvest because it had previously said, you know, he won't curse the ground because of the human race. I guess all those things are in some way connected to planting and harvest, because you can't really plant and harvest when it's cold, but you can while there's heat. Maybe not some things if the heat's too high, but I mean, summer and winter. Winter is not time of growing things. Summer typically is. Day and night, it's, you know, the sunlight is necessary for at least the majority of plants, especially the ones that, you know, would be harvested. So I guess all that's kind of tied into, now that I think about it, tied into the whole idea of, you know, the ground not being cursed because of humanity anymore. So, yeah, I mean, also, you gotta imagine, you know, all that water from the flood, I mean, while it would have messed things up for quite a while, usually right after there's a lot of water is when there's the most vegetation, the most green out of the plant life. Like, that's basically, you know, when the grass is greenest, when most plants are their healthiest, is like right after there's been a bunch of water. Maybe not so soon after a flood, but I think you get my point. So I guess not only is this a reset button from the sake of the wildlife, all the living animals and beings and things like that, but also in terms of, you know, the vegetation and the ground itself. So It just, again, hadn't really taken too much note of that previous times around. So it really is, in pretty much every sense of things, other than, I mean, it's not like the whole sky really was changed, or that the whole oceans were really changed, or anything like that. But, I mean, the things living in the skies were different. The things living in the waters were probably different. So, really, as truly and completely as possible, this did reset all of creation. You know, with the bare minimum of living things, you know, surviving and able to continue on and, as it says, be fruitful and multiply and, you know, repopulate the earth. So, you know, a lot of people, you know, when, you know, thinking through the Bible and, like, our common ancestors or whatever, like, you know, you tend to think about Adam and Eve a lot being the first two humans, you know, Eve literally being named the mother of all, essentially. But really, I mean, anybody prior to Noah is not, like, if you were to try and trace a lineage, it's not necessary to go back any further than that, because all the lineage of everybody on Earth would then be attributed back to Noah, because he and his family were the ones that survived the flood. The only ones to survive the flood. I guess him and whatever lineage his wife was from. But anyway, that's kind of a more technical, minute detail that, again, isn't really so important to take note of. Definitely the whole, like, resetting of things, I think, is important to notice as well. It's not necessarily the same as, you know, the initial creation and God looking upon it all and saying that it was very good, but there's a similar feel to it when God, you know, is pleased by Noah's sacrifice and is like, okay, you know what? I'm not gonna curse the ground anymore. There will be, you know, cycles and life and fruitfulness from this point forward. So anyway, yeah, that does it for now. Next chapter still continues a bit talking about Noah and such. I mean, it's gonna have to, because that's all that's left of humanity. But anyway, yeah. So that's gonna do it for this video. Leave your comments with any other thoughts, things that might have stuck out to you, or different things to connect from other points in the Bible that relate to this, possibly. But whatever your thoughts are, leave them down below. Otherwise, I mean, if you like the video, give it a like down below. Share it with other people if you want them to see it. Of course, if you want to follow me and keep track of my other videos, subscribe to my channel, click the bell, and get those notifications. Look down in the description for info on my other social media stuff. So yeah, that'll do it. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video, particularly for next week when we continue with this. But whenever you tune in, until next time, stay cool, people.